The diner looked different on Christmas Eve. Maybe it was the soft glow of the garlands woven along the windows, or the evergreen scent drifting from the tree in the corner. Maybe it was the way people spoke in gentler tones, as if the holiday itself asked them to tread lightly. Whatever the reason, the old place felt warmer than usual, warm enough that Leah almost believed she belonged there. Almost. She stood just inside the doorway, gripping her crutch, trying not to think about how the cold outside had seeped into the metal limb attached to her thigh. A prosthetic never warmed the way a real leg did. It reminded her constantly of what she'd lost and of what she could never get back. Leah drew a steadying breath and scanned the tables. She had come here for one reason. This was where her unit used to gather after long drills or after nights too heavy to carry alone. This place held their laughter, their footprints, their chow-down rituals. And tonight, on the anniversary of the day she lost them all, she just wanted to sit where they once sat. To feel, if only for a moment, that she wasn't the only one surviving. 3 empty tables. 3 chances. She approached the first. A couple glanced up, saw her uniform, her missing leg, and the way she swayed slightly as she tried to keep her center of gravity. The man shifted uncomfortably. We're actually waiting for someone," he murmured, though the table was set for 2. Leah nodded, pretending she hadn't heard the pity hidden beneath the refusal. She moved on. The second table held 2 teenagers. They stared openly at her metal limb, whispering behind their hands. When Leah attempted a polite smile, one of them shook his head quickly. "Sorry, we're studying." There were no books on the table. At the third, a middle-aged woman tightened her grip around her purse as if Leah's presence alone might bring bad luck. "I'd prefer to sit alone," she said, without lifting her gaze. A familiar heaviness tightened around Leah's chest. She had felt invisible before many injured veterans had, but tonight it felt sharper, like a blade tracing the outline of a wound that never closed. Maybe she should have gone home. Maybe she shouldn't have tried. She turned, intending to leave quietly, when a small voice rose above the hum of the diner. "Dad, can we get extra syrup? Please?" Leah glanced toward the sound. A man sat at a booth near the window, his posture relaxed yet grounded as if he carried weight she couldn't see. His hair fell in loose waves to his jawline, and a light stubble softened the hard lines of his face. Across from him sat a young boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, wearing a red Christmas shirt and swinging his legs beneath the table. The man Graham, she would learn later, looked like someone trying very hard to make the holiday special for his son, even if the world had not been gentle with him either. Leah hesitated. Table 5. That had been one of her unit's favorite spots, a little tucked in the corner but close enough to the windows to watch the snowfall. If she could just sit there for a moment. But he was a stranger. And she had already been turned away 3 times. She didn't think she could bear a 4th. Still, her feet, or rather her foot, and the metal substitute moved on their own. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her palms grew damp against the grip of her crutch. She stopped at the edge of the booth, cleared her throat, and forced her voice to steady. "Hi," she said softly. I'm sorry to bother you. All the seats are taken. Would it be all right if I shared this table with you too?" The boy looked up at her first. His eyes were wide, curious, not at her missing leg, not at her uniform, but at her. Simply her. "You can sit with us," he said instantly, a smile breaking across his face. But Leah didn't look at the boy. Her gaze locked onto the father, the one whose permission truly mattered. For a heartbeat, his expression was unreadable. Calm, quiet, assessing without judgment. Then he shifted slightly, as if making room not just for her body, but for everything she carried. "Ma'am," he said, his voice warm, grounded, respectful in a way that felt rare in the civilian world. "This table always has room for someone like you." Something in his tone, firm, without being forceful. Sincere, without being sentimental, knocked the air from Leah's lungs. She stiffened, blinking, unsure how to respond. She had been thanked, pitied, applauded, avoided, but she had not been welcomed in a very long time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Dad let her sit here." The boy insisted, patting the seat across from him. She looks tired. Leah managed a gentle smile. I've had a long day, buddy. She settled into the booth, carefully adjusting her prosthetic beneath the table. Graham watched in a way she found unnerving, not curious, not pitying, but attentive, as though he understood that every simple movement required balance, intention, and quiet strength. I'm Graham, he said, and this is Eli. Leah, she replied. The name seemed to linger in the air a moment longer than expected. Outside, soft snow began to fall, drifting past the Christmas lights in slow, glowing spirals. Inside, the diner hummed with easy conversation, clinking silverware and carols playing faintly from a speaker near the counter. But for Leah, time felt as though it had narrowed to a single booth, Table 5, the only place in the world where she wasn't standing alone in the cold. Graham folded his hands, leaned slightly forward, and offered a quiet smile. You're safe here, he said. Leah swallowed hard, her throat tightening unexpectedly. She wasn't sure why those words struck so deeply. Maybe because tonight, she hadn't expected to hear anything kind at all. And yet here she was, sitting with a janitor, his little boy, and a warmth she hadn't felt in years. A table no one else wanted. A table that might just change everything. For a long moment, Leah didn't speak. The warmth of the diner surrounded her. Clinking forks, soft Christmas music, distant conversations. But she sat as still as stone, trying to steady the storm, quietly swirling beneath her ribs. She wasn't used to being seen without being studied. She wasn't used to being welcomed without being questioned. Across from her, Eli dipped a corner of his pancake into syrup, humming a cheerful tune. His small voice filled the space between them, like a gentle thread, stitching something together, something she didn't yet dare to name. Graham watched his son with a softness that made Leah's chest ache. A father's love was unmistakable, even to someone who had spent years building walls thick enough to muffle anything tender. After a moment, Graham glanced at her. Cold night to be out alone, he said softly, as if offering a safe place to land without intruding. Leah shifted her grip on her crutch, then rested it against the booth. I didn't plan to stay long, just needed a place to sit for a bit. Graham nodded as though he understood far more than she said. Sometimes a table can feel like a lifeline, he replied. Leah's eyes flickered up. The way he said it, steady, deliberate, made her wonder what lifelines he himself had needed. But instead of asking, she found herself studying him quietly. His jacket was plain, the kind worn by someone used to hard work. His hands were calloused scrapes across his knuckles, faint but visible. A janitor, yes, but something in his posture hinted at an older discipline, a steadiness that wasn't learned pushing a mop. You're not from around here, Graham said, observing her neatly pressed uniform, the service patches, the quiet vigilance in her eyes. No, Leah replied. Just passing through. Then she added almost reluctantly, my old unit used to come here. Before. Graham waited. He didn't rush her. Didn't pry. Before I lost them, she finished. Eli looked up, syrup on his chin. You lost your friends. Leah forced a smile. Yes, buddy. A long time ago, but they were good people. My mom says good people never really go away. Eli swung his legs. They stay in your heart forever. That's what she said. Leah's breath caught. Children had a way of saying truths adults tiptoed around. That's very wise of your mom, she said softly. Graham's gaze dipped for a moment, some old ache flickering across his eyes before he cleared his throat. Eli's mom and I are not together anymore. But she's right about some things. Leah nodded gently and returned her gaze to Eli's glowing smile. Something warm spread through her chest, small, unexpected, tender. Then Eli began humming again. This time Leah recognized the melody. Her spoon froze above her plate. It was a simple tune, a Christmas lullaby, a song her squad used to sing the night before deployment, off-key, joking but heartfelt. It had been the last melody she'd ever heard from them. Her throat tightened, her vision blurred. Graham noticed. Everything all right? She swallowed hard before answering. That song. Where did he learn that Graham turned to his son? Eli. That tune, where'd you pick it up? The boy shrugged cheerfully. I don't know. I heard it on a video once. I liked it. It sounds like snow falling. Leah pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Snow falling. Her unit had said the same thing once, laughing inside a cold tent overseas. Small memories could gut a person. This one nearly did. I'm sorry, she whispered. It just reminded me of people I loved. Graham's expression shifted, less curiosity, more recognition. You served in a combat unit specialized support, she answered. You wouldn't have heard of it. But to her surprise, Graham nodded slowly, as though he had heard of it, or something like it. You moved with discipline when you sat down, he observed quietly, adjusted the leg before you shifted your weight. And the patch on your sleeve. Not many units earned that one. Leah stared at him. No civilian ever recognized that patch, not unless they'd served near someone who wore it. You know more than you're supposed to, she said cautiously. Graham shrugged. I used to know people. Long time ago. She narrowed her gaze slightly. People like me. People who carried more than the eye could see, he answered simply. The diner lights seemed to dim around them. Leah wasn't used to civilians speaking her language, the language of loss, of silent burdens of memories carved into bone. Something about Graham's tone, gentle, solid, felt like a hand reaching into a locked room she hadn't opened in years. She breathed out slowly. Today's an anniversary, she admitted. Not the kind you celebrate. I thought sitting here might make it easier. Does it? Graham asked. Leah looked down at her plate, untouched. I'm not sure, she whispered. For the next few minutes, the three of them fell into a quiet rhythm. Eli colored on a paper placemat. Graham sipped his coffee. Leah tried to steady the tremor in her hand. She wasn't falling apart, but she wasn't far from it. Leah, Graham said gently, you don't have to say anything you don't want to. But if being here hurts more than it helps, I can get the check. And no. She interrupted. Please, just let me stay a little longer. And he did, without questions, without sympathy, without the heavy, suffocating pity she'd grown to despise. He simply let her exist, as if sharing a table with two strangers on Christmas Eve was the most natural thing in the world. Outside, snow continued to drift down the flakes, glowing softly in the window lights. Leah watched them fall, each one disappearing the moment it touched the glass. Something inside her mirrored that fragility, melting before she could hold on to it. After a long silence, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Today isn't just any day, Graham. It's the day my whole team died. Graham set down his cup, carefully, quietly. No sharp intake of breath, no dramatic reaction, just a steady presence, solid as the booth they sat in. I'm sorry, he said. Truly. Eli looked up at her, his childlike sincerity disarming. I'm sorry too, he echoed softly. Leah exhaled her breath, shaking as though it carried a piece of her soul with it. She glanced between the two, this quiet janitor and his bright-eyed son, and felt a strange, fragile warmth blooming through the cracks of a heart long frozen. She hadn't expected kindness tonight. She certainly hadn't expected company. But at table 5, something had begun quietly, gently, like the first trace of dawn after a sleepless night. A beginning she didn't yet understand. A beginning she didn't dare to hope for. Yet. The snow outside thickened into a slow, gentle curtain, muting the world beyond the diner windows. The Christmas lights shimmered faintly against the glass, reflecting the warm hue of the booths inside. But at table 5, warmth came from something quieter, an unspoken understanding forming between three people who just hours earlier had been strangers. Eli finished coloring a crooked snowman and proudly held it up for Leah to see. This is you, he declared. Leah blinked. Me? Why the snowman? Because snowmen are brave, he said matter-of-factly. Even when it's cold, they still smile. A soft, unexpected laugh escaped her. Well, thank you, Eli. I'll take that as a compliment. It is the boy insisted, then slid out of the booth. Dad, can we wash my hands? They're sticky. Graham rose with him. We'll be right back, he told Leah gently. Just stay and breathe. Breathe. The word lingered in her mind long after they disappeared behind the hallway door. Breathe, like she'd forgotten how. She leaned back slowly, unclenching muscles she didn't realize she'd tensed. Her gaze drifted over the familiar features of the diner's scuffed floors, holiday garlands, a waitress humming as she filled napkin holders. So ordinary, so heartbreakingly ordinary. And yet she felt on edge, suspended between past and present. A faint tremor traveled through her thigh, the phantom ache of the limb she no longer had. When she reached down to adjust the fitting of her prosthetic, she hissed softly. The joint had shifted slightly during her walk earlier, pressing uncomfortably against the tender skin. She tried to adjust it discreetly, but her fingers shook. The familiar frustration surged through her anger at her own body, at fate, at the universe's cruel arithmetic that took so much and returned so little. She was still fighting with the connection point when a shadow fell across the table. "May I?" Graham asked. She startled slightly. She hadn't heard him come back. Eli darted off toward their booth, already absorbed in a different coloring sheet. Leah instinctively moved her hands to cover the prosthetic. "It's fine," she said too quickly. "It's not." Graham replied, his voice calm but firm. "You're pinching the socket. That'll bruise by morning." Her eyes flickered with surprise. "How would you know that?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crouched beside her, moving with deliberate gentleness, close enough to help, but not invading. "May I show you?" he repeated. Leah hesitated. No one touched her prosthetic but military therapists and one old medic in a recovery unit. It wasn't embarrassment, it was vulnerability, a reminder of how fragile she really was. But something in Graham's expression, steady and respectful, loosened her resistance. "Okay," she murmured. He nodded and reached carefully toward the attachment point, adjusting the locking strap with practiced ease. His fingers were steady, warm, and unhurried. He paused several times, checking her expression for discomfort, moving only when she gave the slightest nod. "You've been favoring your left side," he observed quietly. "That's why the socket rotated." Leah stared at him. "Most people don't notice things like that." "I'm not most people." The answer was simple, but it carried weight that hinted at a past not nearly as ordinary as his job title suggested. "You're very good at this," she said, unable to hide her curiosity. Graham straightened, brushing dust from his knees. His eyes flickered briefly unreadably. "Let's just say I've worked with folks who carried injuries like yours. You learn things." She studied him. His movements were efficient. Too efficient. His hands knew what they were doing. His posture, even relaxed, suggested someone trained to read the space around him. Something about him whispered. Soldier. Not active duty, but someone who had once lived in the orbit of uniforms, command posts, and impossible decisions. "You were in the service," she said quietly. More a statement than a question. Graham didn't flinch, but a faint tension pulled at his jaw. A long time ago. What branch? He hesitated. Support. Logistics. Nothing exciting. She frowned. Most logistics guys I knew didn't know how to adjust a prosthetic socket blindfolded. His lips lifted in the smallest, saddest half smile. Most people also don't understand survivor's guilt. But you do. Leah froze. The room around them seemed to dissolve, leaving only his calm gaze and the unspoken truth between them. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't theorizing. He was speaking from experience, his own, or someone he'd loved. "How long were you in?" she asked softly. Graham looked down at the table. "Long enough to see things I wish I could unsee. Not long enough to save everyone who needed saving." A sharp ache tightened Leah's chest. She recognized that tone, an old wound carried quietly, privately. The kind of wound that changed the architecture of a person's soul. "I'm sorry," she whispered, meaning it deeply. He met her eyes. "I think everyone who's seen combat or been near it carries ghosts. Yours just sit a little closer tonight." Leah swallowed hard. "It's the anniversary of when we lost them." Graham nodded as if he had known it all along. "That explains the way you were scanning the room earlier. and the stiffness in your shoulders." Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "You noticed that I notice a lot of things," he said simply. "Janitor or not, some habits never leave you." She leaned back slightly, absorbing that. A janitor who moved like he'd spent years watching over others. A janitor who handled a prosthetic with the ease of a medic. A janitor who spoke of ghosts with the quiet authority of someone who lived among them. He wasn't just being kind. He understood. Leah exhaled shakily. "You're easy to talk to," she admitted. "I haven't been able to say half of this to anyone else." "That's because most people listen to respond," Graham said. "Soldiers listen to understand." She stared at him, really stared, and for a moment, she saw past the denim jacket and worn work boots. She saw the man beneath, steady, haunted, compassionate, familiar, in a way that tugged at something deep. Before she could speak, Eli slid back into the seat beside her, proudly holding a fresh coloring sheet. "Look, I drew a Christmas turkey," he said. Leah laughed, wiping the corner of her eye quickly. "Buddy, that's a snowman." "Oh," Eli said thoughtfully. "Well, maybe he's cold." Graham chuckled, and Leah felt something warm bloom in the hollow places inside her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a burden, or a symbol, or a broken soldier trying to pretend she wasn't. She felt human, and Graham, with his quiet strength and deeper secrets, felt like someone who saw all of her and didn't flinch. Outside, the snowfall grew heavier. Inside at table 5, something fragile and extraordinary was beginning to take root. Morning had begun to slip into the diner through the frosted windows, casting soft streaks of winter light across table 5. The Christmas Eve crowd shifted as families came and went, some carrying shopping bags, others bundled in scarves, cheeks flushed from the cold. Yet the 3 people at the corner booth remained unchanged, suspended in a quiet, fragile bubble of connection that none of them seemed ready to break. Leah, who had entered the diner as a ghost of herself, now found her shoulders settling into a more natural curve. The tremor in her hands had eased. The ache of memory had dulled from stabbing to steady. She didn't know whether to credit the warmth of the room, the innocence of little Eli, or the quiet strength of the man across from her. Perhaps it was all 3. Graham had just signaled for a refill of coffee when Eli suddenly sat up straighter, eyes widening with the clarity of a new thought. "Dad," he whispered loudly enough for the entire booth to hear. "I think Miss Leah is sad." Leah blinked, startled by the boy's directness. Children saw the world with no filters and no hesitation. She wondered briefly what version of herself he saw. Graham gave his son a soft look. "Eli, buddy, people can feel sad, even when they're smiling. It's part of being human." "But today shouldn't be sad," Eli insisted. "Today's Christmas Eve. That's supposed to be special." Leah forced a small smile. "Some days are complicated, Eli. Even holidays." The boy frowned in concentration, then asked with the sincerity of a child trying to solve a puzzle, "Is something bad today?" "Like, really bad?" Leah hesitated. She had kept the truth locked tightly inside her since she woke that morning. But now, with 2 sets of eyes watching her, one gentle one curious, she felt the walls weaken. "It's my birthday," she admitted softly. The boy gasped. "Your birthday?" "Today?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, but I wasn't planning to celebrate." "Why not?" Eli asked. "Birthdays are the best. You get cake and wishes." And Eli Graham interrupted gently. "Let her finish." Leah swallowed, cheeks warming. "I didn't want to celebrate because birthdays feel strange when the people who used to wish you well aren't here anymore." Silence enveloped the booth, warm yet heavy. Graham didn't speak at first. Instead, he held her gaze, offering steady presence without pressure. There was something healing in that, in being seen and not pushed. Then, without warning, he exhaled and stood. "Eli," he said, "come with me." "Where are we going?" the boy asked, already scooting out of the booth. "To fix something," Graham replied simply. Leah watched them cross the diner confused. They whispered to the waitress, who immediately brightened and nodded. Eli nearly bounced in place while Graham reached into his wallet. "What are you doing?" Leah called, gently, half standing in concern. Graham turned, slightly expression unreadable. Stay there. Her brow furrowed. She wasn't used to people doing anything for her, especially not on a day she had tried so hard to disappear into. She sank back into her seat, heart beating faster than before. A minute passed, then 2. Then, the lights in the diner dimmed slightly. The waitress rolled out a small dessert plate with a candle flickering on top, a modest slice of chocolate cake, crowned with a swirl of cream. Eli marched beside her like a soldier in a parade, wearing the biggest grin she had ever seen on a child. Graham followed them, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, eyes gently fixed on her. The waitress set the plate in front of Leah and announced with theatrical cheer, "We have a birthday in the house." Several heads turned. A few customers smiled. One older couple even clapped softly. Leah froze, stunned, her throat thickening. "No," she whispered. "No, really, you didn't have to." But Eli was already singing. "Happy birthday to you." His small, earnest voice carried across the diner, pure and unself-conscious. Others joined in first, a man at the counter, then a pair of teenagers who had refused her earlier, their faces now softened with regret. The entire diner fell into rhythm, their voices weaving together into a warm, imperfect melody that wrapped around Leah like a blanket she didn't know she needed. She felt the first tear before she realized she was crying. It slid down her cheek, warm against her cold skin, then another, and another. Graham sat beside her, not across from her this time, his presence steady grounding. He didn't touch her, didn't say anything. He simply offered quiet companionship as she let the emotion spill freely. When the song ended, Eli leaned forward and whispered conspiratorially, "Make a wish." Leah wiped her cheek, inhaling shakily. I don't know what to wish for." "Yes, you do," Graham murmured, his low voice brushing against the fragile spaces inside her. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to want something small, something human, something alive. When she opened her eyes again, she blew out the candle. A faint cheer rose from the surrounding tables. Eli clapped. Graham smiled, not wide, not showy, but soft and proud, as if this victory belonged to all three of them. As Leah lifted her fork to take the first bite, her elbow brushed something on the table. She glanced down. The dog tag. It must have fallen from her pocket when she sat. Graham reached for it at the same moment she did, and their hands met above the metal tag. He froze, not at the touch, but at the name engraved into the silver surface. For a split second, his eyes widened, a flicker of recognition so sharp, so unmistakable. Leah felt the air shift around them. "You know this name," she whispered. Graham's jaw tightened. A shadow crossed his face, subtle but undeniable. He closed his fingers around the dog tag and handed it back gently. "I've heard it before," he said quietly. "How, from where?" But Graham didn't answer. Not yet. His silence told her more than words could. A new thread had just woven itself between their histories, one darker, deeper, more complicated than either of them understood. And though Leah didn't know it yet, the name on that dog tag would become the doorway to the first real twist of their intertwined pasts. The softness of the birthday moment lingered in the air, like the fading warmth of a blown-out candle. But beneath that warmth, something else had surfaced. Quiet, sharp, and unsettling. Leah felt it the way one feels a shift in wind before a storm. Graham's reaction to the dog tag had not been imagined. It had been real, too real. But he had looked away. He had closed the door just as quickly as she'd opened it. And Leah, who had spent years studying the micro-movements of men under pressure, recognized avoidance when she saw it. Still, she didn't push. Not yet. The diner had begun to empty out. A family bundled in coats offered Leah small birthday wishes as they passed. A pair of teenagers waved sheepishly from the door, and the waitress slipped Leah a free cup of hot chocolate from the Christmas pot, winking warmly. But Leah barely tasted it. Her thoughts drifted, circling the same question. How does he know that name? The dog tag belonged to Corporal Henry Mason Mace, her closest friend, the soul of their small unit. The one who kept morale alive with jokes that were terrible but effective. The one who always volunteered first when things got ugly. The one who died in a dusty stretch of desert during a mission she still relived in dreams and daylight. It wasn't a common name, not in that circle. Not one civilians would recognize, and certainly not one a janitor in Portland should. Eli yawned theatrically, leaning into his father. "Dad, can we go now?" "I'm sleepy." Graham smiled down at him, brushing a hand through the boy's hair. "Yeah, buddy, we'll head out soon." Leah took that as her cue to stand, except when she placed weight on her good leg. The prosthetic tugged sharply, reminding her she'd walked too much that morning. She wobbled slightly. Graham noticed instantly. "Hold on," he said gently, stepping closer. "You okay?" Leah nodded. "Just a long day." He didn't look convinced. "Let me walk you out." "You don't need to. It's not about need." The firmness in his tone silenced her protest. They gathered their things, and soon the three of them stepped into the crisp winter air. Snowflakes settled on eyelashes on scarves on the brim of Graham's jacket. The street glowed with Christmas lights, and distant church bells rang softly, a melody of warmth against the cold. Eli ran ahead a few steps, crunching fresh snow under his boots. Graham walked beside Leah, hands in pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the wind. For a while they didn't speak. Then, "You recognize that name," Leah said quietly, not accusing, just stating. Graham inhaled breath misting in the cold. "It's a common enough name." "No," she said softly, "not in that context." He didn't answer. Leah stopped walking. Graham eventually halted beside her. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said, "but don't pretend it meant nothing." Graham looked away, eyes fixed on the snow-covered ground. "Some things are complicated, Leah. Some things don't help anyone by being dragged back into the light." She held his gaze, searching the lines of his face. "Did you work with him?" He hesitated. It was brief, half a breath, barely noticeable. "But enough. Not directly," he said finally. "I assisted. Peripherally." That word, peripherally. It carried the weight of truth and the shield of omission. Leah felt her pulse quicken. "You were part of the operation." "Leah, which one?" she pressed. "There were 3 major deployments before we lost him. Which one were you attached to his breath caught?" He didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. "The second deployment. The one no one wanted to talk about. The one that left scars deeper than simple losses. The one that sent Leah home with 1 less limb and 1 more ghost." The realization struck like a physical blow. You were there. Something shattered in his expression. Not denial, not confirmation, but a flicker of pain so raw she almost stepped back. "Not on the front line," he said softly, "but close enough to know what happened." Leah clenched her jaw, memories flooding in the sandstorm that swallowed their convoy, the explosion, the panicked radio transmissions, the last garbled words from Mace before the line went dead. Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you say anything inside?" "Because Graham said quietly, 'This isn't about me.' Today, tonight, wasn't the moment to open old wounds. You deserved one evening where your ghosts didn't do all the talking." Leah's chest tightened. "They always do. Not tonight." She stared at him, this quiet janitor whose hands moved like someone who'd held dying soldiers, whose instincts spoke of training long abandoned, whose eyes carried the reflection of someone who'd seen too much to sleep easily. "You could have told me sooner," she whispered. "You could have asked sooner," he replied, though there was no malice in his tone, only truth. They stood in silence as snow thickened around them, each flake settling softly like small blessings or apologies from the sky. Then a small voice called from ahead. "Dad." Miss Leah, look. Eli had wandered toward a bench beneath a lamppost. Snowflakes danced in the golden halo of light around him as he pointed up at the sky. "Snow angels." He giggled, reaching his arms out. The childlike joy pierced the heaviness in the air. Graham exhaled. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for knowing more than I should, for not knowing how to say it." Leah closed her eyes briefly. I don't know how to hear it. When she opened them, his breath clouded beside hers, two broken people sharing a cold street, both carrying pieces of a past neither had chosen. But neither walked away. Not yet. Eli tugged on his dad's sleeve. Can Miss Leah come next Saturday? We get pancakes. Graham looked at her. Not pressuring, not assuming, just offering the smallest of lifelines. You're welcome to join us, he said. Leah almost refused. She almost backed away, swallowed by memory and pain. But something deeper urged her forward. A whisper inside that said, maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. I'll think about it, she said. But even she could hear the quiet yes beneath her words, because the past, no matter how painful, had just opened a door. And Table 5, unexpected, unplanned, was beginning to feel like the only place where she might find the courage to walk through it. Saturday mornings in Portland carried a particular kind of quiet, soft, unhurried, the sort of quiet that let a person breathe without realizing they'd been holding their breath. Leah had lived in the city for months, yet she had never truly noticed this stillness before. But now, as she walked toward the diner 1 week after that unforgettable Christmas Eve, her steps felt different, less guarded, less hollow. A fresh layer of snow covered the sidewalks, crunching under her prosthetic limb with each stride. She adjusted her scarf and forced herself to calm the nervous flutter rising in her chest. It's just breakfast, she reminded herself. Just pancakes. Just kindness. But she knew better. Nothing had been just anything since the night she sat at Table 5. She hesitated at the entrance, fingers brushing the door handle. Part of her feared she might walk in and discover she'd imagined the warmth, the connection, the strange sense of belonging she'd felt with Graham and little Eli. People were kind on holidays. It didn't mean anything lasting. But as soon as she opened the door, Eli spotted her. Miss Leah, he shouted, nearly knocking over his juice cup as he scrambled out of the booth. She barely had a moment to brace herself before the boy wrapped his small arms around her in a fierce, unfiltered hug. Leah froze, overwhelmed by the uncomplicated affection. Slowly, cautiously, she placed a hand on his back. Graham stood behind him, hands in his jacket pockets, a soft smile in his eyes. You came. I said I'd think about it. Leah replied, though her lips curved upward despite herself. And Graham asked, I thought, and here I am. Eli grabbed her hand and tugged her toward the booth. I saved you a seat. Leah slid into the booth, adjusting her leg with practiced grace. Graham sat across from her, the same quiet presence as before, steady as bedrock. The waitress greeted them by name now, as if the three of them had always belonged together in that corner. As Eli colored another snowman, this one intentionally wearing camouflage, Graham leaned forward slightly. How's your week been? Leah exhaled. Better than most. That's good to hear. She hesitated. I started therapy again. His eyebrows lifted, impressed. That's a big step. It was easier to take after... She paused, searching his face. After the other night. He nodded slowly, understanding more than her words conveyed. Sometimes, even one good night reminds us that the world isn't all heaviness. She looked down at her hands. I didn't think I'd feel that again. You will, he said with quiet certainty. Not all at once. But you will. A silence settled between them, comfortable, gentle, until Eli proudly held up his drawing. It's you, he told Leah, but this time you have a magic leg that lets you fly. Leah blinked, startled, then laughed a full, genuine laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. A flying leg, huh? Eli nodded enthusiastically. Dad says everyone has something that makes them special. So, I drew yours. Her gaze softened. Thank you, Eli. That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me this year. The boy beamed and returned to his coloring. Graham watched her with a quiet tenderness she didn't quite know how to interpret. Not romantic, at least not yet, but deeply human. After breakfast, Eli insisted on showing Leah the Christmas decorations outside the diner. A large wreath hung from a lamppost, and garlands wrapped around the handrails. Leah followed him carefully down the small steps, adjusting her balance. Graham hovered close, but not too close. "Need a hand?" "I've got it," she said. And she did, though his presence steadied her more than her prosthetic ever could. Once outside, Eli ran ahead, leaving Leah and Graham under the silver glow of morning light. "You're good with him," Leah said softly. "He's easy to love," Graham replied, "even on the hard days." "What happened?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "With his mother." Graham didn't flinch. He gazed at the snow-splashed pavement before answering. "Marissa and I were young, too young to know what to do with the weight we were carrying." "Your military past?" she asked. He nodded, and the way it changed me. "I came home alive, but not really whole." She tried. I tried, but the cracks kept spreading. "I'm sorry," Leah offered. Graham shook his head. "We found peace eventually. She's still in Eli's life, but she and I, we became two people walking in different directions." Leah understood that. Painfully well. "And you?" he asked gently. "Anyone waiting for you?" Leah let out a breath that misted in the cold air. "No. Not anymore." She didn't elaborate, but he didn't push. They walked a few more steps in silence, snowflakes catching in their hair and on their jackets. Then she spoke again, voice softer. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When you saw the dog tag, was it because you were there?" His footsteps slowed. "I wasn't there when it happened," he said carefully, "but I was close. Close enough to hear the radio. Close enough to know who didn't come back." Leah swallowed, throat tightening. Henry Mason. He was my closest friend." "I know," Graham said quietly. The wind seemed to pause. Leah stopped walking. Her breath hitched. "You knew him?" Graham nodded, eyes heavy with memory. "Not well, but enough to know he saved more lives than he lost. Enough to know he was brave." A tremor traveled through Leah's chest. He deserved better. "So did you," Graham said. The words hit her like a strike against armor she didn't realize she still wore. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. She wanted to sit down in the snow and let years of grief wash over her. But instead, she inhaled through her nose, steadying herself. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I can see that." They turned back toward the diner, where Eli was now attempting to catch snowflakes on his tongue. "You know, Graham said you don't have to do any of this alone." Leah looked at him, really looked, and something inside her shifted. A small opening, a fragile beginning. "I don't know how to let people in anymore," she admitted. "You don't have to," he replied gently. "Sometimes, they walk in anyway." As if on cue, Eli ran back and grabbed both of their hands, tugging them toward the snowy sidewalk. And for the first time in years, Leah allowed herself to be pulled forward, not by orders, not by duty, but by something far simpler, kindness, that had quietly, steadily become a habit. Winter deepened over Portland like a slow exhale. What began as weekly breakfasts soon blended into a rhythm steady, familiar and gentle, in a way Leah hadn't experienced in years. Saturdays meant pancakes, Eli's drawings, and quiet moments where Graham's presence soothed the jagged edges of her memories. Sometimes they met at the park, where Eli launched snowballs with the reckless joy only children possess. Other times they simply walked three silhouettes moving through the soft glow of streetlights. For Leah, healing arrived in small pieces. And for the first time since her unit's death, those pieces began fitting together. But healing, she would soon learn, is rarely a straight line. One early February morning, Leah arrived at table 5 to find Eli decorating the booth with paper hearts he'd cut himself. "It's for Valentine's Day," he announced proudly. "Miss Leah, look, I made one for you, too." His enthusiasm warmed her more than the diner's heaters. She took the heart. "This is beautiful, Eli." "Thank you." Graham smiled from across the table. "He's been working on that all morning." Eli puffed up with pride. "Dad says Valentine's Day is about love and kindness, and I love pancakes. So it counts." Leah laughed, a sound that came easily here. "Absolutely." The morning passed with simple joy, sharing stories, teasing Eli about syrup on his nose, watching Graham pretend not to laugh as Eli tried to teach him how to fold another paper heart. It was one of those mornings that felt like a promise Leah didn't know would soon be broken. A few days later, Leah returned to the diner alone. She had finished physical therapy early and decided to surprise Eli with a small set of crayons she'd found at a bookstore. But as she approached table 5, she saw Graham sitting there, not with Eli, but with a woman. The woman was striking long brown hair, polished coat, a smile that reached her eyes. She leaned across the table, touching Graham's hand lightly as she laughed. Graham wasn't laughing, but he wasn't pulling away either. His expression was soft, familiar the way one looks at someone with history. Leah froze. Her first instinct was to turn around, but her prosthetic leg clicked lightly against the floor. The woman glanced up. "Oh, you must be Leah," she said warmly. "I've heard so much about you." Leah blinked, stunned. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." Graham stood, though slower than usual. "Leah, this is Marissa." The name hit her like a blow. Marissa. Eli's mother. The one Graham spoke about only gently, cautiously. The one he had once loved enough to build a life with. Marissa extended a hand. "It's wonderful to meet you. I was just telling Graham that I'll be in Portland more often now. Maybe we can all spend more time together like a family." Leah's heart dropped so sharply she felt it in her prosthetic. A family. Her fingers tightened around the crayon box in her coat pocket. "Oh," was all she managed. Graham opened his mouth perhaps to explain, but Marissa continued her tone, bright and easy. "Eli will be thrilled. We're talking about possibly moving closer again. Maybe even—" She laughed softly. "Well, we'll see. One step at a time." Leah didn't hear the rest. Her pulse was loud, her ears numb. The scene blurred Graham's stillness, Marissa's laughter, the easy intimacy between them. It all pressed against her chest until she couldn't breathe. "I should go," she said quickly. Too quickly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "Leah, wait," Graham said, stepping forward. But she had already turned toward the door. He followed her outside, catching up on the snowy sidewalk. "Leah, it's not what you think." She didn't stop walking. "You don't have to explain anything. It's your life." "Marissa is here for Eli," he insisted, voice steady. "That's all." Leah shook her head. "I'm not asking questions. I don't want explanations." "Then what are you afraid of?" he asked quietly. She froze. "I am not afraid," she said, though her voice betrayed her. "I just don't want to be in the way Graham echoed. "Leah, you are not. You have a family," she whispered. "A real family. Something worth fixing. Something worth trying again for." Her throat tightened. She couldn't look at him. She swallowed hard. "I'm just someone who sits at your table on Saturdays." The words hurt to speak, but they hurt more because she believed them. Graham stepped closer. "That's not true." But at that moment, Eli burst out the diner door, bundled in a coat and scarf. "Miss Leah, Dad said you might come today." He grabbed her hand eagerly. "Guess what Mommy says? Maybe we'll all live together again, like before." Leah's breath shattered. "See," she whispered to Graham. "This is exactly why I need to leave." She gently pried her hand free from Eli's. "I'm sorry, buddy. I have to go." Eli blinked, confused. "But you promised you'd teach me how to draw a soldier next time." She forced a smile. Next time, okay. But she knew there wouldn't be a next time. Without waiting for Graham to speak, she turned and walked down the snowy street, each step a silent fracture widening inside her chest. Her prosthetic clicked sharply, echoing the cracks she felt spreading through her. She didn't answer Graham's texts that afternoon. She didn't answer the next day, or the one after that. Instead, she told herself she was doing the right thing, that she was stepping aside so a little boy could have his family back, so Graham could have something whole, something she believed she could never be. And as days turned into weeks, the silence between them grew heavier, colder, and more absolute. A silence that neither kindness nor habit could fill. Not yet. Late winter crept into early March, with gray skies, chilled rain, and the kind of heavy silence that settles over a home when memories speak louder than anything alive. Leah had always believed she understood loneliness, its shape, its rhythm, its weight. But this new silence felt different, sharper. Because it wasn't born from loss alone. It was born from walking away. Walking away from the first warmth she had known in years. Her small apartment in Northwest Portland had never felt so hollow. Therapy sessions continued, but her progress slowed. She ate less, slept in fragments, and avoided public places. The prosthetic leg pinched more frequently, an old injury's way of whispering that something deeper was wrong. And every night, she replayed the moment on the sidewalk outside the diner. Mommy says, maybe we'll all live together again. In her dreams, the words warped into battlefield echoes, blending with radio static, with Mace's fading voice, with explosions and dust storms. Her mind stitched them all together into an endless loop of failing the people she cared about. And Graham, quiet, steady Graham, had become part of that loop. He texted. He called. He showed up once outside her building, waiting in the cold for over an hour. She watched from behind the curtain, heart clenching so tightly she could barely breathe. But she didn't open the door. Because the truth in her mind was simple. He already had a family. She didn't belong in it. End of story. But the storm that would break her silence was already gathering. It happened on a Thursday night. Leah woke abruptly, drenched in sweat, breath ragged. The dream had started as it always did, with her unit in the desert laughing around a makeshift table. Then came the radio crackle, the sudden roar, the explosion that swallowed everything. But this time, something changed. This time in the dream, Mace turned to her, his face lit by firelight. He opened his mouth to speak, but the voice wasn't his. It was Graham's. I'm sorry. I was the last one who saw him. She jolted awake. The words echoed in her skull even as she tried to shake them free. She stumbled from bed, gripping her dresser for balance. Her prosthetic throbbed angrily. Her breath wouldn't steady. She pressed her palms to her temples. No, she whispered to the empty room. No, no, no. But the voice persisted, Graham's voice layered over memories she'd buried. His steady tone meshing with radio static. His apology fusing with the last broken transmission of her fallen teammate. Her mind, exhausted, unmoored, began stitching new patterns. Graham was there. He knew something. He had heard something. Maybe even seen something. She sank to the floor, shaking. For the first time in years, a panic attack crashed over her, completely pulling her beneath its dark tide. When she finally managed to breathe again, she felt hollow, raw, terrified of the truth, whispering beneath her thoughts. He was the last one to see Mace alive, but she needed to know. If she didn't face it now, it would consume her. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She scrolled through the unread messages from Graham, days and days of them. Are you okay? Please talk to me. Eli misses you. I won't push, but I'm here. Please, Leah, just tell me you're all right. Her throat tightened. For a moment she considered calling him, but the thought of hearing his voice made her chest constrict painfully. She needed answers. But she needed distance too, and she needed the truth from him, not the comforting silence he'd wrapped around her before. She typed a single message. We need to talk. Tomorrow. His reply came in less than 10 seconds. I'll be there, anytime, anywhere. She hesitated, then typed again. My place, 7 p.m. Then she turned off the phone and exhaled shakily. It was time. Rain battered the windows the following evening as Portland's sky churned with dark clouds. Leah spent the day cleaning, nervously pacing, adjusting her prosthetic, rechecking old medical files, then sitting on the couch, only to stand again moments later. She didn't know what she hoped to hear. She only knew she couldn't keep running. At exactly 7:00 p.m., a soft knock echoed through the apartment. Her stomach clenched. She opened the door. Graham stood there, damp from the rain, eyes filled with worry and something deeper, relief maybe, or fear of what was coming. Leah, he breathed. She stepped aside wordlessly, letting him enter. He waited until she closed the door before he spoke. You disappeared, he said gently. And I didn't know why. I didn't know how to help. Leah didn't sit. Neither did he. You knew Mace? She said, her voice trembling. You didn't just know his name from a report. You knew him. Graham swallowed the muscles in his jaw tightening. Yes, and you were there, she whispered, not at the explosion, but close, close enough to hear what happened. He nodded once. Leah felt something inside her twist painfully. Why didn't you tell me? Because he said softly, I didn't want to be another ghost whispering in your ear. I wanted to be someone who helped you live, not someone who dragged you backward. Her breath hitched. But knowing the truth doesn't drag me backward. Not knowing does. He stepped closer, searching her face. What do you want to know, everything? She whispered. All of it. Even the parts that hurt. Graham exhaled rainwater dripping from his coat. I was on the support team for your unit, he began. I monitored their approach route. Mace! He radioed through me before the line went dead. Leah's knees went weak. She steadied herself against the wall. What did he say? Graham closed his eyes. He asked if the others were safe, and he told me. Tell Leah she's tougher than she knows. Her breath fractured. Her heart stuttered. Her legs nearly gave. He said your name, Leah. You were the last person he thought of. Leah covered her mouth as tears surged forward, years of grief, guilt, unanswered longing. It all came crashing down in one overwhelming wave. Graham reached out instinctively, but stopped just short of touching her. He wasn't alone, Graham whispered. Not in those last seconds. I was on the line. I heard him. He wasn't afraid. He died thinking of his team. Of you. Leah sobbed, then quiet, shaking sobs she had held back for far too long, and Graham, seeing her break, finally stepped forward and pulled her gently into his arms. She didn't resist. She collapsed against him. Safe, warm, seen. After a long moment, he whispered, You didn't push me away because of Marissa, did you? You pushed me away because you didn't think you deserved us. Leah trembled. I don't want to lose anyone ever again. You won't, he murmured. Not like that. Not us. Lightning flickered outside. Rain hammered the windows. But inside that small apartment, two broken histories finally collided, not to shatter further, but to begin stitching each other back together. Rain had eased into a soft drizzle, tapping gently against the window, as dusk deepened into night. Leah stood in the middle of her living room, trembling, but finally breathing. Graham still held her, but loosely now, as if giving her the space to step back, whenever she needed. She didn't step back. For the first time since the explosion that changed her life, she didn't feel like she was standing alone in the wreckage. After several quiet moments, she wiped her cheeks and straightened, though her voice remained fragile. I'm sorry I disappeared. Graham shook his head. You don't owe me an apology. But I do, she insisted. You reached out. You worried. And I just shut down. You were hurting, he said softly. That's not the same as shutting people out. Leah met his eyes. Isn't it? He hesitated. Maybe. But pain makes people do strange things. I know that better than most. She swallowed. I thought you and Marissa might get back together. A long silence settled between them. Graham exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across the back of his neck. Ah, so that's what this is. I saw you two together, she said. She looked so happy, like she wanted something again, something whole. And you assumed I wanted that too. Leah looked away. You have a family, Graham. A real family. He stepped closer, shaking his head gently. Leah, my family isn't something that snaps back into place just because someone wishes it. Marissa and I, we ended for reasons that don't go away. Being kinder to each other now doesn't erase the years we spent growing apart. But Eli is loved, Graham said firmly. But love isn't the same as being a couple. What Marissa and I have now is cooperation and respect, nothing more. She felt heat rise in her face, not from shame, but from the sudden weight of her own assumptions. You should have told me, she whispered. You didn't ask. He replied, voice soft, not accusing. You ran, before I could say anything. Her breath faltered, because I didn't want to be in the way. Leah. He said her name like it meant something sacred. You were never in the way. You were the reason Table 5 stopped feeling empty. Emotion tightened her chest. She moved instinctively toward the door, needing something solid to lean on. Graham followed, stopping only when he realized she wasn't pulling away from him, just grounding herself. When she finally turned around, she spoke in a near whisper. I've never been good at letting people in. Not after Mace. Not after my unit. Not after losing everything I thought made me valuable. Graham stepped closer. What makes you valuable has nothing to do with your leg or your service record or what you've survived. It's you. The you who stood alone in a diner that night. The you who still finds the courage to walk into new days, even when your ghosts try to drag you backward. She blinked hard, trying not to cry again. But her defenses were too fragile now. And Eli, she asked softly. What about him? Won't I confuse him? Graham smiled, gentle, certain. Leah Eli already sees you as part of his life. He talks about you every Saturday. He draws snowmen with flying legs because he thinks you're the bravest person he's ever met. Leah's heart squeezed painfully. He said something about the three of you living together again, about family. That was Marissa talking out loud, Graham said. She sometimes confuses hopes with plans, but there's nothing there. She knows that. I know that. And Eli. He knows more than most kids his age, Graham murmured. He understands that love doesn't mean people stay together in the same house, and he understands that love grows in unexpected places. Leah leaned back against the doorframe, breath shaking. I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something I don't deserve. Graham stepped close enough that she could feel his presence wrap around her like warmth. You deserve a life, he said. Not just survival. She let those words sink in. They felt heavy, but not crushing. More like a weight she had needed to carry for a long time. And I deserve the truth, she said. All of it. Even the parts that hurt. Graham nodded. I told you what Mace said. But there's one thing I didn't tell you. Leah held her breath. After the transmission cut out, he said slowly, I blamed myself. For weeks. For months. I replayed that moment every night, wondering if I could have relayed the information faster, reacted quicker, saved one more life. Her chest tightened. Graham. But then I learned something. He continued, voice low. Your team trusted him. They trusted you. And even though I wasn't beside you physically, I saw how fiercely you fought, how you refused to leave anyone behind, including him. Leah felt a sob rise but swallowed it. She didn't want to fall apart again. Not entirely. You think I was brave, she whispered. But I left with only half of myself. Bravery isn't about what you leave with, he replied. It's about what you carry forward. She covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. Quietly, slowly, Graham reached out and touched her wrist. Leah, he said, look at me. She lowered her hands. He held her gaze steadily. You didn't take anything from my life by coming into it. You didn't steal something from me. You helped me find something I didn't think I'd ever get back. What? She whispered. Hope, he said. Simply. The word cracked something open inside her, a floodgate, a dam long overdue for breaking. Without thinking, without fear, she stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest. His arms folded around her, steady and certain. I'm scared, she admitted, voice muffled. I know, he whispered. But you're not alone anymore. Lightning flickered faintly through the window, illuminating their shadows on the wall. Rain softened into silence. And in that stillness, Leah felt the impossible, something she never imagined she would feel again. A fragile, tentative beginning. A beginning that felt like healing. A beginning that felt like home. Spring arrived in Portland as a quiet promise. Soft rains giving way to gentler skies. Bare branches sprouting new life and daylight stretching just a little longer each evening. For Leah, the season felt almost symbolic, as if the world itself was subtly urging her toward renewal. Weeks had passed since the night Graham stood in her doorway and told her the truth about Mace, about his own guilt, about the fragile hope that had grown between them. Their connection, once tentative, now felt deeper, steadier. They walked slowly into it, neither rushing nor retreating. Healing had its own rhythm, and they were learning to move with it. But one place remained untouched, since the misunderstanding that had pulled them apart. Table 5. And today, Graham had asked her no, invited her to return there with him and Eli. Leah arrived early. She stood outside the diner, her breath visible in the cool morning air. The storefront looked exactly as it had on Christmas Eve. The same garlands now replaced with spring flowers, the same soft glow of lights, the same crooked paper sign advertising fresh coffee, no questions asked. But Leah was not the same woman who had walked in that night. Her prosthetic steadied beneath her. Her shoulders no longer sagged with invisible weight. And though grief would always be part of her, it no longer felt like an anchor, more like a shadow one she could walk beside rather than run from. She stepped inside. The familiar warmth washed over her instantly. She hesitated for only a moment before her eyes found it. Table 5. The booth where everything had begun, where loneliness cracked open just enough to let light spill in. Graham was waiting. He stood as soon as he saw her worry flickering briefly across his features, until she smiled a small, steady reassurance. "You came," he said. Leah set her crutch aside and slid into the booth. "You asked." He chuckled softly. "Fair enough." A moment later, Eli burst forward from somewhere behind Graham, holding a small potted plant decorated with painted rocks. "Miss Leah, this is for you." Leah blinked, startled. "For me, it's a new beginning plant," Eli explained proudly. "Dad says sometimes people need something to grow in their house to remind them they're growing too." Graham stiffened, embarrassed. "I said that. Less poetically." Leah laughed, warm and genuine. "I love it." Eli climbed into the seat beside her, already launching into a story about his school's spring festival. As he talked, Graham watched them both with a tenderness Leah felt in her bones. For a while, they simply ate breakfast, scrambled eggs, pancakes, toast with raspberry jam. Ordinary food, extraordinary comfort. Eli chattered. Leah listened. Graham listened too, with that quiet presence she had come to cherish. Then, as the waitress refilled their coffees, something shifted in the air. Graham straightened slightly. He slid out of the booth, slow, deliberate, and kneeled beside the table. Leah's heart skipped. Graham. He reached into his pocket and withdrew something silver. The dog tag. Mace's dog tag. Polished clean, but the engraving remained worn with memory. "I need to return this to you," he said softly. Not as a reminder of how he died, but as a reminder of how deeply he lived, and how much he believed in you. Leah's eyes filled instantly. She reached out, fingertips brushing the metal. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, breath unsteady. "There's something else." He placed the dog tag in her hand. Then he produced a small ring, a simple band, modest but gleaming with sincerity. Not flashy, not traditional, but meaningful. Her breath caught. "Graham." He looked up at her eyes, clear voice steady. "You asked me once without saying it, if there was room for you in my life. The truth is, Leah, you didn't just fit. You filled spaces I thought were broken forever." Her pulse pounded. "I don't want to undo my past," he said. "And I don't want to erase yours. I want to build something alongside it. Something real. Something steady. Something that feels like a second chance for both of us." Leah's throat tightened painfully. Graham continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "So I have a question for you. The same one that changed everything for us." He swallowed emotion, thickening his words. "Leah, on that first night you asked, 'Can I share this table?' He held the ring gently between two fingers. "And today, I want to ask you." His eyes shone not with fear, but with hope, raw and open. "Can you share the rest of your life with me and Eli?" The diner quieted around them, as if the world understood the gravity of the moment. Even the waitress paused discreetly at the counter, eyes welling with emotion. Eli leaned forward, whispering loudly, "You can say yes. Dad practiced this speech all week." Graham groaned softly. "Eli!" But Leah was laughing through her tears. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed not by shock, but by the immense, unexpected rightness of the question. She had survived loss, injury, guilt, and years of emptiness. She had walked through darkness so thick, she thought she would never see dawn again. But standing here at table 5, with the man who helped her breathe again, and the child who reminded her she still had a heart capable of love, she felt something she had thought impossible. Wholeness. She reached out and took Graham's hand, steady and warm. "Graham," she whispered, voice trembling with joy. "I thought I'd lost the chance for this kind of life, but somehow, you and Eli brought me back to myself." She squeezed his hand. "Yes," she breathed. "My answer is yes." Eli squealed, throwing his arms around both of them. Nearby customers clapped. The waitress wiped her eyes. Even the cook peeked from the kitchen with a grin. Graham slid the ring onto her finger, careful, reverent. Then, as the diner filled with applause and warmth, Leah leaned into him, letting herself finally feel the miracle that had unfolded from one simple question. One table, one soldier, one janitor, one unexpected beginning. A table that had once symbolized loneliness, now marked the start of a forever. Spring deepened into early summer, the kind that warmed Portland without overwhelming it. Soft breezes carrying the scent of blooming hydrangeas, sunlight pooling gently on sidewalks, and evenings long enough to stretch into unhurried conversations on front porches. For Leah, the season felt like a quiet rebirth, one she never imagined she would live to feel. She had begun physical therapy again, not just to manage pain, but to rebuild strength. She volunteered at the local Veterans Center twice a week. She cooked dinner with Graham and Eli on Sundays, laughing at Eli's enthusiastic but disastrous attempts to flip pancakes. And some evenings, when the world felt steady enough, she and Graham sat together on her small balcony, watching stars emerge like cautious blessings. Healing wasn't perfect. It wasn't linear. But it was happening. And today, something special waited for her. The diner was busy when Leah pushed the door open, but the noise softened the moment she stepped inside. Familiar faces turned toward her regulars who had unknowingly witnessed her story from the periphery. The waitress waved. Someone from a nearby table offered a warm smile. But Leah barely noticed. Her eyes were searching for two people. She found them instantly. Graham was standing near table 5, adjusting something she couldn't quite see. Eli bounced excitedly beside him, holding what looked like a small plaque hidden beneath a cloth. Leah felt herself smiling as she approached. "What's all this?" Eli practically vibrated. "We did something special," he said, "because today's important." She blinked. "What's today?" Graham stepped toward her, taking her hand gently in. "Today," he said quietly, "is the anniversary of the night we met." Leah's breath caught. Not in pain. In awe. "You remembered," she whispered. "How could I forget?" Graham said, brushing his thumb against her knuckles. "That night changed everything for us." Eli tugged her sleeve eagerly. "Can we show her now?" "Dad? Can we show her?" Graham chuckled. "Go ahead." With great ceremony, Eli whipped the cloth away to reveal a small brass plaque affixed to the edge of the booth. Leah leaned closer. Her breath trembled. The engraving read, "Table 5, where kindness began." Her eyes blurred instantly. She raised a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "Graham." He stepped closer. "This table gave us something we'd both been missing for a long time. A place to breathe, a place to be seen, and a place where our lives took a turn neither of us expected." Leah touched the plaque, her fingers trembling over the engraved letters. Memories washed over her. The cold weight of rejection that night. The shaky moment she'd asked, "Can I share this table?" Graham's warm reply. Eli's innocence, the laughter, the breakdowns, the truths spilled in darkness. The slow mending of two broken souls, all of it rooted here, in this booth. "People sit here every day," Graham continued softly. "But I wanted there to be something that stays, something that reminds anyone who stops to look that miracles don't always happen in bright places. Sometimes they begin right where someone thinks they don't belong." Leah pressed her palm over her heart. Words felt too small, too human, too fragile. Eli hopped into the booth with a grin. "We thought maybe we could take a picture together. Dad says we're a team now." Leah laughed through tears. "A team, huh? The best kind," Graham said. A waitress snapped a photo of the three of them, Leah seated between Graham and Eli, all of them smiling with a fullness that hinted at battles fought and victories quietly won. She handed the camera back with a warm nod. "Your table's going to be famous," she joked. Leah felt something deep inside her settle, like a piece of her spirit finally finding its place. They ordered breakfast, and as they ate eggs fruit, Eli's beloved pancakes, the diner hummed around them. People came and went, but table 5 remained a small world of its own. After the plates were cleared, Graham reached for something tucked in his jacket. "I have one more thing," he said. Leah blinked. "More?" He nodded toward the small potted plant Eli had given her weeks ago, which she'd placed on the table today. "Do you remember why Eli wanted you to have that plant?" She smiled. "He said everyone needs something that grows in their life to remind them they're growing too." "Exactly," Graham said, "but I think there's something else to add." He opened a tiny box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a charm shaped like a small table. Leah inhaled sharply. "Graham." He placed it gently in her palm, a reminder, he murmured, that even the smallest moments like sharing a table can change a life. Or 2. Or 3. Eli chimed in. "And it's shiny." Leah laughed softly, tears returning, but in the gentlest way. She clasped the necklace around her neck, letting the charm rest just above her heart. Graham reached out, brushing his fingers over it. "You've carried so much loss, Leah. More than anyone should. But I hope this us can be a beginning you don't have to carry alone." Tears spilled freely now. She didn't fight them. Instead, she reached for Graham's hand. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" he whispered. "Myself." His breath faltered. He pulled her into his arms, warm and steady, and for a long moment, she simply held on, feeling the world narrow to the embrace of someone who loved her, without needing her to be anything more than who she was. Eli wrapped his arms around both of them, declaring loudly, "Group hug." The diner burst into soft laughter, and someone called out, "That's the happiest table in the house." And maybe it was. When they finally stepped outside, sunlight filtered through spring clouds, casting a soft halo over the three of them. Leah paused at the curb. Graham slipped his hand in hers. Eli grasped the other. Leah looked down at the table-shaped charm resting against her chest. Then she looked at the 2 people beside her, her found family, and she whispered not to them, but to the memory of the people she'd lost. "I lived. I kept going. Not alone. I made it, Mace. I made it somewhere good." The breeze carried the words gently away, and in that moment, she knew the truth. Kindness had saved her life. Love had rebuilt it, and hope, quiet, persistent hope, had chosen to stay. All beginning with one question. Can I share this table? A question that became a miracle, a table that became a home, a story that would live forever at table 5. If this story touched your heart, we'd truly love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Your messages and reflections mean more to us than you know. They help this little community of kindness grow one story at a time. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share heartfelt stories of hope, second chances, and everyday miracle stories that remind us all that kindness still matters and that it's never too late for a new beginning. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Your presence here is a gift, and we're grateful for each and every one of you. Until the next story, may warmth and peace follow you wherever you go.